We're not our past, and we're not the brokenness, and we're not the color of our skin, or we're not any of that, really. We are light. And how beautiful is that reminder? Isn't that awesome? That just feels good. And that's when we can really come back to center and do what we're going to be talking about today, and that is daring to have an abundant life. I am daring all of us to have an abundant life. And we are doing this based on the book, turned it on, The Art of Abundance by Dennis Merritt Jones. And he has 10 rules for a prosperous life. But before I get into those, I want to first go over a little bit. We talked about abundance and prosperity last week, and that there's a difference between abundance and prosperity. And so abundance, Dr. Roger Teal says, is the infinite life intelligence of the divine that we live and move and have our being in. That is the source of our abundance. It's the going within and also looking around. And that was part of our homework this last week. I hope that we did it. Going out and just seeing the abundance that is everywhere. It is in nature. You just see it everywhere. And really allowing ourselves to sink into that deeper place and be aware that we have come forth as abundant beings, that we are imbued with that. But we're all not necessarily prosperous beings. And so prosperity is how much of this abundance are we allowing to flow and to manifest into our life. And here, when we're talking about prosperity, I'm not talking just about money. There's prosperity of health, prosperity of friendships, relationships, prosperity of talents, prosperity of time, prosperity of energy, whatever it is, that prosperity is the more than enough of whatever. And then we talked about the first two rules: be one with life and be aware that you live in an expanding universe. And what we talked about with that was the practices of mindfulness and awareness. And mindfulness and awareness are two different things. Mindfulness brings us to the present moment in which we realize our oneness with life. That's mindfulness. We come, you're sitting here today, and I guarantee you some of you are thinking about something else. So I'm inviting us to come in mindfully to this present moment. Feel the chair, feel the air, know that you're sitting in the sanctuary and you're listening to an awesome talk. So I want to make sure you're listening. Okay. So just bringing ourselves into the present moment, that's mindfulness. Now, awareness, and I love how he says this, is the laser light that focuses on what is happening in the present moment. And this is where our point of power is. We bring ourselves mindfully into this present moment, and we become aware of what it is that we're thinking about when we're not thinking about what it is that we're thinking about. Right? We become aware. So today we're going to focus on the next two rules, and that is be accountable for your consciousness and be focused. And that's why I titled today's talk, Conscious Consciousness. And when I want to start by talking about the parable of the wine and the wineskins in Mark 21:22, and there's also parallel passages in Matthew, Luke, and the book of Thomas. Jesus says, "No one sews a patch of unshrunk cloth on an old garment. Otherwise, the new piece will pull away from the old, making the tear worse. And no one pours new wine into old wineskins. Otherwise, the wine will burst the skins, and both the wine and the wineskins will be ruined. No, they pour new wine into new wineskins." Now, there's a book on parables that I was reading, and what it says is that the old and the new wineskins represent opposite belief systems. Any of us walk around with opposite belief systems? I'd have to say probably most of us have some opposing belief systems in us. And he goes on to say that this is implicit in Leviticus 19:19, which says, "You shall not sow your field with two kinds of seed, nor shall there come upon you a garment of cloth made of two kinds of stuff." Now, recognize in unity, we see the Bible as the evolution of the consciousness of man, of woman, of all of us. And so the planting the seeds is the planting of whatever thought seeds are in our consciousness, the fertile soil of our mind. And so it's saying don't plant a seed of belief and then a seed of disbelief and another seed of disbelief and another seed of disbelief, because that tends to be our MO, is we can plant a seed of belief, but then all that other stuff comes up. The old garment, he says, is a view in which things are fragmented and devoid of the power and life of God, the active power and life of God. And that's why it is so important that our first step in our journey is always to take the time to go within and just to be in the oneness with all that is, whatever you want to call that, and activate that power and life of God first. And then throughout the process, as we're planting seeds, we're going to continue to activate that power of life of God to bring those seeds into manifestation in our lives. So ultimately what this means is a transformed consciousness. That's what we're working towards, is a transformed consciousness. And so in essence, what Jesus is saying is it's useless to try to patch up one's way of old thinking and living with a few new thoughts while holding on to the rest of the thoughts. Said it's better to throw away the old rotten garment and to put on a new one. And so again, it's not enough for us to think a few new thoughts and then to go right back into our stinking thinking and our stinking talking and our stinking action. You know, we've got to wake up and take responsibility, because we are that powerful, and we are here to be co-creators with the divine, co-creators with the divine. Now, Dennis Jones, the author, says that it's ironic that the term consciousness is still widely used in the spirituality and self-help movement, and yet few of us ever take time on a regular basis to truly explore the depths of our consciousness and examine what lies therein, let alone considering how it got there. So why is that? He says, because, and here's what's important, we are often too busy obsessing over what we don't have, trying to fix, heal, change, control, or manipulate the conditions, which are the effects or the circumference of our life, rather than dealing with the cause that lies at the center of our consciousness. Can anybody relate to that? Any of us try to fix things on the outside or manipulate and control things on the outside to try to get our life to be better? Anybody do that ever? Carl Jung said, until you make your unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Maxwell Maltz said, one of the reasons it seems so difficult for a person to change his habits, his personality, or his way of life has been that heretofore nearly all efforts at change have been directed to the circumference of the self, so to speak, rather than to the center. And then English novelist Samuel Butler, born in 1835, says it is our less conscious thoughts and our less conscious actions that mainly mold our lives and the lives of those who spring from us. And it's interesting to look at that, because it's important. It's that the sins of the father, the parents, are passed down from generation to generation. Because unless we wake up and we choose something different, we pass down to our children and they pass down to their children's children. How many families do you see that live in poverty for generations and generations? I remember reading a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and really children who are raised in an environment where money is just flowing all the time have no issue with money. It's just a normal thing that abundance flows into their lives. Or, I was thinking about Myrtle Fillmore, our co-founder, and how she was told all the time that she was sickly, that she was weak. And she developed tuberculosis, and which, when she was finally, given 6 months to live, she grabbed hold of these principles. She transformed her consciousness. She got out of that stinking thinking. She said, no, that is not true. I'm a child of God. I don't inherit sickness. That's what they told me, but that's not true. And she claimed it, and she blessed her body, and 2 years later, she was free of tuberculosis in a time when that was really unheard of, and she lived to be in her 80s. And so it's that recognition that it's so important what we're passing down to our children and ultimately to our children's children. When you become accountable for your consciousness, that's when you become accountable for the life that you are co-creating. Because guess what? You're doing it anyway. We're doing it all the time. And we cannot blame anything outside of us because we are not victims of anything. I love that he talks about an iceberg, and he said that the example of an iceberg in the water is a classic example of how much of our mind operates below the surface level of our conscious awareness. And he said, and this really stunned me, it is estimated that the conscious mind constitutes 5% of our total awareness, and that meaning that 95% lies below the field of our awareness. I believe that because of the kind of community that we are and what we teach, that those percentages are different for us because we work very much on becoming conscious creators. But I still think there's probably a whole lot underneath there that is running the show that we're not even aware of. He says, the saying, it's only the tip of the iceberg, perfectly encapsulates the conscious mind. The majority of our life is run by what lies below the surface, our unconscious mind, sometimes referred to as our subconscious mind. So imagine how much of our life is being, and that's why becoming mindful and becoming aware is so important. You know, when you think about when you were a child and you were given all of these seed ideas, and you know, we don't know any better, right? And so we're just open to whatever we're being told. And I think about how many kids have been told that they weren't enough, they weren't good enough. You know, you don't have what it takes, or you're not musically talented. And we probably either have experienced some of that ourselves, or we know people who have talked about how that kept them from doing things in their life. You know, I've read many stories where people were told that they were musically not gifted. And, you know, much later in life, they come across a music teacher and they find out, well, that was never the truth anyway. And so, you know, that recognition of what we take in. But the Bible says, Scripture says, when you were a child, you acted like a child, you thought like a child, but when you become an adult, you put those childish things away. And so what Dennis says is that as an adult, it's time for us to become conscious of the beliefs that we're allowing into our mind. And in many ways, you guys, we have to stand porter at the door of our consciousness. And we have to decide what we're going to allow to be planted in this fertile garden of our mind. And we're being bombarded all the time. And one of the things we have to remember is that there is a collective consciousness. And this collective consciousness has been a consciousness of lack. How many commercials do we see about medications? It's a consciousness of not being healthy. You know, there's a collective consciousness that we're dealing with here, so that's why we have to be even more aware. We have to take responsibility for our own lives, and we have to wake up and become aware, stand porter at the door of our consciousness and say, no, you are not invited in. And I can't tell you how many times somebody will say something to me and I'm just like, no, I'm not going to take that as my truth. And I have to be that, like, you know, no, I'm not taking that as my truth, because I don't want it to even have a chance of getting its little nub inside of me, you know, because it's so quick sometimes that we can take on somebody else's truth. And unless their truth is something that it is empowering, don't take it. You don't have to accept their truth as your truth. Did you know that? You don't have to accept their truth. And recognize, too, that it takes time. This takes time. Because we're building our consciousness one thought at a time, one belief at a time. And, you know, on this journey, because I've been doing this for, over 30 years, and you know, the recognition that, you know, you take these steps forward and then you feel like you take a few steps back because then all this stuff comes up. But here's what I want to tell you, that when we expand and grow, we will never go back to what we were. We may feel like we have, but you can't. That you have expanded, and that as you continue to move forward, then it does become easier with time. But I'm also going to tell you, you still got to stand porter at the door of your consciousness, because there's a lot of beliefs out there knocking and wanting to get in there. The consciousness never takes a vacation, just know that. So that's why it's so important for us to stay awake and aware. So he says that irrespective of what we may call it, there is an organizing intelligence that permeates every living thing, which compels it to grow, push out, evolve, unfold itself, and uniquely express the essence of life that flows through that thing. And our work is to realize that we are each a living thing and trust that this compelling power knows how to grow the results of our greatest intention through us. Please hear this. It is not up to you how. The moment you get into the how is the moment that you are going to start doubting. Our job is to create the focus, the intention, plant those seeds and feel it. We're feeling, whatever you ask in prayer, believe, so you're acting as if our job is to be in that place. If you're wanting to have an experience of greater health, then you're focused on that. You're abiding in that consciousness of health and wholeness and life energy, and you're imagining what it would feel like to wake up in the morning and feel great and to do the things that you love to do, and you're putting that energy into it, and you're not figuring out the how. Because it's not your job. That's God's job. That's the divine intelligence job. And yours is to stay awake and aware so that as these things come up, then you say, oh, yeah. Oh, that sounds good. Yeah, I'm going to take that avenue, or I'm going to take that avenue. So remember, get out of the how, and you'll say, whoa. How many of us have heard of the law of attraction? Okay, law of attraction essentially is whatever it is that we're putting out there vibrationally, that is what's going to be coming back to us. This is not a new age, airy-fairy idea. It first was in print in 1887 in a book written by the Russian co-founder of the Theosophical Society, Helena Blavatsky, but the principle itself has been around for thousands and thousands of years. And so this is a very real thing that we're talking about here today, that whatever is our consciousness, that the greatest, deepest beliefs and feelings that we're putting out, the universe is responding in kind. And so we want to wake up to that. So he gives us some ideas, some practices, okay? So one of the things is the next time you turn on the television, watch a movie, or start to read an article or a book, be aware of the intent of what you are watching or reading, realizing that the essence of its content, is seeping ever so inconspicuously into your consciousness. The self-inquiry is ask yourself, do the words I read or the programs I watch align my mind with the principle of abundance? Do they feed my mind with healthy, life-affirming images, constructive ideas, and storylines, or is it the content less than soul-serving? Now, I know that we might be sitting there going, oh, wait a second. So here's what I want to say. It's not that you can't watch the shows that you love to watch, but I would say become more aware of what it is that these shows are actually putting into your consciousness, and make sure that you're putting a whole lot more good stuff in than you're giving time to that. I loved a friend of mine shared that she was talking to her son one day, and he asked, what she was doing. She goes, I'm just watching TV. And he said something, you're feeding the zombie. And she was like, what? And he said, you're feeding the zombie. And it was like such a wake-up call for her that, and like he's been reading, and she said, well, I don't have time to read. And he said, you absolutely do have time to read, Mom. You're just not making the time. Woo, out of the mouths of babes. Huh? But the reality is we can have all kinds of excuses why we're not feeding our minds with really good things. And there's a lot of good things out there. You get on YouTube, you go to TED Talks, all kinds of books. You can get on our website, listen to talks. I mean, you can listen to a lot of really good things and great music, and I encourage you to do more of that. Number 2, become aware of your relationships, both intimate and casual, because they each reflect some aspect of your current consciousness. The type of relationships you have speaks volumes as to who you think you are and how worthy you believe you are. And we're going to talk more about worthiness, self-inquiry, not today. Ask yourself, are my relationships with people who inspire and lift me to higher levels of thinking? Or do our conversations revolve around a belief in not enough, or gossip, or complaining about how bad things are, essentially staring at what's wrong with life rather than what's right? And I'm going to tell you again that once that people get into unity or any type of new thought thing, I've had many people say, I've had to let a relationship go because the negativity was too much, and I could no longer be in the midst of that. We're going to skip one of these. And then the last one is, are you a coupon clipper or a bargain shopper? Seeking to save money is not a bad thing, and I want you to hear that. This is not about saying that it's always good to want to save money. That's okay. But we must become clear on our motivation behind it. Self-inquiry, what is my motivation behind the simple wisdom? I'm sorry, got this wrong. I'm not spending more than I need to, or am I driven by a belief in scarcity, the fear of not enough? Do I feel worthy of the best? And I had to sit with that and be so honest with myself, and I realized that I don't feel worthy of the best. When I would think about, the best of something, it would feel too far to me. And that was a great awareness. A great awareness. It's not that I always have to have the best, but it was so far that I'm like, oh, okay, I have some work to do there. It's more about what is our motivation. I love yard sales. I am the sale person of go to a store and get a great sale on something. The thing is what is underlying that? It just brings me joy. But if you're doing it and your mindset is it's the only thing that I can do, I don't have enough money, we can see the difference, right? Yeah, so we just want to become aware of that. Okay, so ultimately, what we want to remember to do, you guys, is to abide in the Christ consciousness. Jesus said in John 15:5, I am the vine, and you are the branches. He who abides in me, and I in him, he is that bears much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. And so, in other words, when we abide in the same consciousness as the Master did, we cannot possibly see or experience lack of any kind. Jesus always portrayed absolute faith in the unknown. And he is telling us that as we ourselves abide in that we will bear much fruit. And so what I want us to do, and we didn't do the meditation earlier because I wanted to end with a meditation today, is just to invite you for a few minutes to go into some time of meditation with me. So if you'd just like to close your eyes for a moment and just take in a nice couple of deep breaths. And knowing truly that the Christ of us is the vine, and our life experience, it is the branch. And so the I am of us is this vine. And the I am of us, the vine, is literally filled with everything that we could possibly ever need or want in our lives. That it is literally connected to the source of all that is. And that as the branch, we are ever connected to that greater Christedness, that greater I amness. And so I'm going to invite you from this place of abiding, just abiding in the vine, to allow yourself to see through the Master's eyes, to see through the Christ consciousness as you look at your life. If you're looking at your life and there's been an experience of lack financially, When you're looking through the eyes of the Christ, there is unlimited abundance. There are unlimited avenues through which your good is flowing to you now. That's how the Christed of us sees. That's how the Master sees. There's overflowing more than enough. And if you or someone that is dear to you is dealing with a health issue, the Master never saw anyone in their sickness. He only saw their wholeness. And so I invite you to take this opportunity to see the greater truth of yourself or this person, to behold the life energy that they and you are connected to, that rises up infinitely from this greater source and moves through every aspect of the mind, body, and spirit, bringing healing, life-giving energy. And if somehow in your life you're experiencing loneliness, just feeling separate, the Master never saw disconnect, but only oneness. And allow yourself to see through those eyes that you can see that there is love everywhere. And that love, that you are willing to give that love out. And in so doing, that love is returned to you tenfold. In this moment, you are experiencing the divine impulse of all that is. You are experiencing the greatest truth that there is. And you are transforming your consciousness by seeing through these eyes. So I'm going to invite you just to take a moment in the silence, just to view your life through the eyes of the Christ. And you know that you know that you know what it is that you live and move and have your being in. And you will never be the same again. And so it is, and so it shall be. Amen. And namaste. Namaste.